Two unusual time-slip stories where people came upon buildings where upon returning a short time later found that they had drastically changed or simply vanished. The Edwardian shopkeeper. The following time-slip story took place in 1973 in Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, which is a resort town on the east coast of England. A man with the amusing surname Mr. Squirrel entered an old-fashioned shop surrounded by cobblestones in the main street of Great Yarmouth with the intention of purchasing some transparent envelopes in which he could put his coins. As he entered the premises, he noticed that the inside was also old-fashioned, but the strange thing of all was that once inside the shop, he felt an eerie silence and the outside traffic noise had completely vanished. As he approached the counter, a young woman suddenly appeared. He noticed that she was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, with a blouse and a cameo brooch around her neck. Her skirt was long, and as she approached him, her skirt made a swishing noise on the floor, and her hair had been pulled back into a bun. At first, he was taken aback by what she was wearing, but he realised that was the 1970s, where her attire would not have been out of place. He then asked the young lady whether she had any envelopes suitable for his coins, whereas she produced a type of envelope that she said was used by fishermen to keep their hooks in. He purchased 36 envelopes for 1 shilling. He then said goodbye and left the shop. After a few days, he finished cataloguing the coins and found he had quickly run out of envelopes and headed back to the old-fashioned shop to purchase some more. However, when he arrived at the shop, he found that the cobblestones had disappeared, and in their place were paving slabs, which he could see had been there for a long period of time. So the old cobblestones could not have been recently replaced. The front of the premises had also changed, as it was no longer quaint and old-fashioned, as it now had a rather drab appearance. As he stepped inside, it was also totally different, and instead of a young woman at the counter, a much older woman served him dressed in modern clothing. He then asked the woman for more envelopes for his coin collection, but she told him she didn't stock them. Now confused, Mr. Squirrel then told the lady that only a week earlier a young lady had sold him some envelopes and went on to describe her appearance, but the older woman told him that no such assistant had worked at the shop, and she herself had worked in this shop for many years. He left the shop dumbfounded. But things became even more bizarre when he took the envelopes to an expert to have them verified and was told that they were around 10 to 15 years old, but did add that the cellulose front of the envelopes had been around since the 1920s. However, judging by the clothing on the young woman, she appeared to be dressed as if she were from the late 19th or early 20th century, which confused him even further. Searching for answers only led to more questions and more confusion. In 1973, Britain had decimal currency. Though the shilling he gave her would have still been legal tender, however, 1 shilling in a period of time would have been worth a lot of money. So why was she not surprised at receiving such a large amount for the envelopes? Mr. Squirrel had someone entered a shop that appeared to have been dated around 1900, along with the shop assistant, who was also dressed for that period of time. Yet she presented him with relatively modern envelopes and accepted such a large amount of cash, which would have been a modern shilling rather than an old one from 1900, which would have been minted in the Edwardian era. It appears that Mr. Squirrel had entered a time slip, and one theory put forward was that his grandfather was also a coin collector and could have visited the shop in the 1900s, and by some strange incident, their memories had somehow merged. Friends said that he'd probably visited 2 different shops and had simply made a mistake, but Mr. Squirrel was certain that this was not the case. Another theory was that Mr. Squirrel could have entered a parallel universe. The Phantom Cottage. The following was an unusual series of events that took place possibly in the early 20th century, as no exact date was mentioned. The location was in a wood in Haytor, on the eastern edge of Dartmoor in the county of Devon in southwest England. There were several sightings of a phantom cottage that only appeared at certain times, but on other occasions was nowhere to be seen. It had simply vanished. One day a visitor was in the woods and came upon the mysterious cottage, which she admired. She liked it so much that she even approached the owner of the woods to seek further information as to the history of the attractive cottage. However, the visitor was shocked when the owner told the woman that no such cottage existed. Not satisfied with the answer, the woman went back to where she had seen the cottage to prove the man wrong, only to find that it was no longer there, and could find no such building in the area. The visitor was not the only person to encounter this phantom cottage, when another person had recently moved into a house on the other side of the wood, and after a short walk through the woods came upon an attractive cottage. However, when they later returned to the location, they found that it had disappeared. The first visitor and the person who recently moved into the area had never met each other, yet both described the same quaint building. Later, a surveyor working on the Ordnance Survey came upon the cottage and was surprised that on his previous visits in the area had somehow missed it. He reported that he observed smoke coming from a chimney and there were clothes hanging on the clothesline. When he later returned for a closer inspection, he found no trace of the cottage, and when he flagged a passerby and asked her about the cottage, she too was confused, as she claimed that she had once seen it, but it seemed to have vanished. With so many people reporting their sightings, a closer inspection was later carried out, but they were unable to locate the remains of any cottage, and there were no signs of any foundations of an old cottage. The only explanation given was that the phantom cottage was from the future and not the past, or maybe these people had encountered a time slip or temporarily stepped into a parallel universe.